Hi, David. Let me know if you can hear and see me well.
Hi, yes, seems to be fine.
Perfect. I can hear and see you well. Thank you so much for your time, especially on this such short notice. As you know, things have been unfolding really quickly in Texas right now. So,
I've been trying to catch up myself.
yeah, so thank you for all your help. David, just to start, can I have you say your first and last name and your title?
I'm David Froomkin. I'm an assistant professor of law at the University of Houston Law Center.
Fabulous. So, David, we've seen a lot of taxes pulled from Texas leadership to get Texas House Democrats back in the state because of that quorum break to block a redistricting vote. But most recently, we have seen Governor Abbott file a lawsuit, a very rare one that's only used in really rare scenarios, against Representative Jean Wu. Can you explain to me what this lawsuit is? It's very specific. I think of a writ of warranto. Can you explain this?
A quo warranto action is a suit asking a court to rule on the validity of an official's holding of their position, whether they are legally entitled to hold the position they say they hold. It is quite rare for it to be used to question the validity of a public official's position. Ordinarily, it would apply in a situation where they were appointed and there was a question about the validity of that appointment. So it's particularly unusual for it to be invoked in a situation like this, where there's no question about the validity of the original holding of the position.
And with that being said, what's the likelihood that a Supreme Court would look at this lawsuit and find it valid to stand?
I think there's no question that uh, this is an entirely invalid claim. There are a number of problems with the argument that the state is advancing here. The first is a jurisdictional problem. Uh, I think it's highly unlikely that a court would even have jurisdiction to hear this type of case, because the jurisdictional provision that entitles a court to rule on a writ of quo warranto applies to an officer of state government. And there's a very deep question about whether legislators fall within that category. And in fact, the state Supreme Court has in the past held that it is a narrower category that does not include legislators. So there's a very fundamental jurisdictional obstacle to a court's ability to even rule on this question.
With that
There
being
are also
said,
substantive issues that I'm happy to talk about.
could you maybe give me the most important substantive issue?
Well, fundamentally, this is a violation of the separation of powers. The Texas Constitution contains a separation of powers clause that says that where powers are allocated by the Constitution to one branch of government, the other branches of government are not permitted to intrude on the exercise of those powers. Here we're talking about a legislative function, how the House organizes its internal affairs, right? So the representatives who have left the state in order to prevent a quorum from being reached are doing so under an arrangement that the House has adopted, pursuant to House rules that govern their attendance and absence. That's an internal House affair that the other branches of government should not be interfering with.
This is one of many tactics that we've seen Texas leadership pull. Would you consider this another way of bringing attention to the issue that maybe appeases Republicans and the president? Or why do you think Governor Abbott would deploy such a serious movement towards Representative Wu?
Well, I think we've gone beyond what experts have called aggressive political hardball. We are here entering the territory of something more disturbing, something that I think could be fairly called authoritarian. When political leaders question the legitimacy of their political opponents. The position that the governor seems to be taking here is that members of the state legislature who oppose his agenda and have used legitimate procedures afforded by the House rules to advance their position lack the legitimacy to hold their positions simply because they are trying to exercise those positions to oppose his agenda. That is extremely disturbing, and it is a new era in state politics, unlike anything we've seen before.
On that topic, Do you think that, is it fair to say, is it a fair assessment to say that this lawsuit is testing the legitimacy of Representative Wu's position in Texas leadership?
Well, I don't think there's any legal question about his legitimacy. It's very clear that he's entitled to continue holding his position. The lawsuit tries to make the argument that he has somehow abandoned his position because he's trying to deny the House a quorum. Uh, that is not a serious argument.
One of the other questions I wanted to ask you is what kind of precedent does this set for the future of not just state politics, but maybe national politics, that if a duly elected representative disagrees with leadership and the agenda set by leadership, what kind of precedent does this set for what could happen in the future?
It's really shocking. This is a step that I don't think anyone would have anticipated. It crosses the line beyond ordinary political tactics to something much more disturbing. And the really sad aspect of it is that the quorum rules in the Texas House long promoted an atmosphere of bipartisan comedy that made the Texas legislature operate in a much more uh, bipartisan and collegial way than many legislatures. And it's very sad to see that breaking down now because the majority party is so intent on advancing its own political objectives that it is now deploying these kinds of tactics to undermine the very standing of the opposition.
Mm. David, my last question for you, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I just want to ask again, how surprised would you be if this lawsuit held up in court?
I would be shocked, quite frankly. Uh, it's hard to predict the future, as they say. Um, but it would be really surprising if the court were to engage in such a brazen violation of the separation of powers and such a complete reversal of its own precedents.
David, is there anything else that you want to add that maybe I haven't yet asked you, but you think is important to mention on this topic?
I don't think so.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you for your expertise. And again, thank you for being available on such short notice. I appreciate your help. This is airing tonight at 10 o'clock, and it'll be available on our website shortly after.
Okay, great.
Thanks so
Well,
much.
good
Have
to
a
talk
great
to
rest
you.
of your day. Yeah, you
Take
too.
care.
Bye.